Thank you for joining me, everyone. Charles Moskowitz here. So, what happens if, God forbid, we lose President Trump? The phony impeachment agenda is moving forward. The campaign for 2020 is going to be based on not a conventional race between a Democrat and a Republican, but between a Republican and impeachment. I don't think that they really think they're going to get Elizabeth Warren elected president of the United States, and Bernie Sanders, or either Bernie Sanders, and certainly Biden is wrapped up in the real sense in the kind of scandal that they're accusing President Trump of. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to impeach him, and that doesn't mean that it's not going to be damaging. This has been their agenda since day one. The Washington Post did an article the very day of the inauguration, calling it the first day of the impeachment. We've got distinguished historians like Alan Lichtman calling for Trump to be impeached for his war against women. I mean, just to show how demented Trump derangement is. I mean, the people could become that besotted with hate and ideology that they would think something like that, let alone articulate it. But nevertheless, we have to be prepared for the possibility that they will be successful, that they will impeach Trump, and that there are enough traitors in the U.S. Senate, like maybe Mitt Romney, who will vote to convict him and remove him from office strictly for political and personal reasons. I mean, we saw, for example, the late Senator John McCain spike an attempt to reform Obamacare simply because he didn't like Donald Trump personally. Now, I'm sure he had his reasons for not liking Donald Trump. Trump can be a pretty rough character, but to sacrifice the interests of his nation just for a personal vendetta, while despicable, is something that I think plays a factor in this coup attempt against Trump. Trump has made enemies personally. The charge itself, I'll just mention briefly that President Trump probably shouldn't have brought up Biden's son in that conversation with the new prime minister of the Ukraine. Usually traditionally presidents and leaders of corporations and heads of governments have left that kind of thing to other people to do. They don't do it themselves. Trump tends to like to take on issues himself. And that's, I suppose, both a power and a curse. And it was not exactly appropriate for him to mention that in that conversation. He shouldn't have done it. Not one of his brightest moves. But is that impeachable? Did he coordinate to withhold aid? Not that, by the way, there'd be anything wrong with that, to Ukraine unless they investigated this corruption? Now, what about the corruption itself? Look, first of all, I don't think that there's anything in the Constitution that says that any nation is entitled to foreign aid. And if Congress passes an aid package, the way that's implemented or not is at the discretion of the executive branch. So I don't think there's anything impeachable there. Conversely, we have Vice President Joseph Biden speaking at an event sponsored by the Council on Foreign Relations. You can see the CFR logo on the background of the footage, bragging about having a Ukrainian investigator removed because he was investigating his son, and stating as a fact that he had done this by threatening to withhold aid. Obama apparently made Biden the head of the Ukraine desk, if you will, and gave Biden the authority to make those negotiations. And he said flat out, we're withholding aid until you get rid of this prosecutor who wanted to question his son about his corrupt involvement in the Burisma oil company, or else we're going to withhold aid. And so they fired him, and Biden was bragging about it. I mean, this is something that's a fact. This is on tape. It's on footage. Council on Foreign Relations. You can't get more establishment than that. And there he is bragging about doing exactly what Trump is accused of doing. But let's put the hypocrisy aside. The reason that I wanted to talk today is to talk about exactly what happens if, God forbid, we lose Donald Trump. It would be a catastrophe. There's no real way around that. It would be a catastrophe for the movement that supports him. It'll be a catastrophe for the country, for the presidency. It will move us in the direction of becoming a parliamentary system, by which a prime minister can be removed by a no confidence vote, and that's what this would be. And that's damaging, and that's very destructive. The goose steppers over on the left don't care about that. They just want to stop Trump at any cost. As I mentioned, the Alan Lichmans of the world. They don't care what it takes. They want to stop Trump because of what he stands for, which they despise and fear. And so the thought of him being taken out, which is going to set them into a frenzy, is one that's troubling for a lot of reasons and on a lot of levels. First of all, if they take out President Trump, does that mean an end to the investigation into these corrupt members of the FBI like Comey and his coordinates, and the CIA like Brennan and his people, and the National Security Council like Clapper and his people, not to mention the Department of Justice under Loretta Lynch? These are people who coordinated at best, I should say, or at least were peripherally involved in an attempt to frame President Trump and have him removed from office. And they started the program before he was elected and continued it right up to the minute that they got Mueller and his brown shirts appointed to the office of special counsel. This whole frame-up of the Russia collusion theory was a setup from the beginning. That's too much to get into right now. Greg Jarrett, who's a journalist, did a very good book on the topic. Sean Hannity is doing a great job of covering this. One of my favorite YouTubers, Bill Still, is doing a great job with it. So I'm going to leave that work to them. But I just bring up the fact that if President Trump is, God forbid, removed, that's going to come to an end, and that kind of corruption will triumph and will continue to rot and pervade and worm its way into our entire system. To the degree it already has is shocking. And the fact that what happened, this whole collusion conspiracy hoax, the fact that that could happen shows how far they've come. And that will continue, and there will be ramifications for all Americans if it does. But even more fundamentally than that, and more seriously than that, the movement that President Trump represents will be at risk if he's removed from office. A movement that puts America first in frank, blunt terms. American industry, American labor, for the first time probably since World War I, has been put first with regard to our negotiation with foreign nations on issues of trade. You know, the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, says that Congress shall regulate tariffs and trade. That's a basic function of a sovereign nation. That's what our government is supposed to do, decide how we relate to foreign nations as trading partners. They have a right to regulate trade and to ensure that American industry gets the best break and preserves American labor. President Trump is the first president to really take that on. President Trump is the first president since World War II, possibly World War I, to begin to de-escalate America's involvement in these foreign wars. It's not an easy thing to do, but he has begun the process. He has begun withdrawing troops. He's begun to demand that foreign nations who are our allies pay for their own defense. I think if President Trump is elected, we can see America withdrawing from Germany. It's about time. The Soviet Union collapsed. As bad as Putin is, he's not a threat to Western Europe any longer. Western Europe can stand on its own. He will, I think, move toward a negotiation with North Korea. that will result maybe even in a de-escalation of American forces in South Korea and Japan. He's putting American interests first, American men and women in uniform first, American taxpayers first. He's reducing onerous regulation. He's holding the line on taxes. He's trying to reform healthcare to the point where it's more affordable for average citizens. He's reducing the cost of these onerous costs of drugs, prescription drugs, and he's taking out gangs who are selling illicit drugs. I mean, there are so many ways and so many levels by which President Trump is bringing a novel and appropriate and common sense approach to government that it will be all at risk if he goes down for this one stupid conversation he had where he mentioned Biden's son, which, is that illegal? I don't think so. You can ask a foreign country to investigate any kind of corruption you want. Seems to me the question is what kind of corruption was going on there? How is it that the son of Biden's was on the boards of directors of companies going all the way back to when Biden was first elected to the Senate, I think, or all the way back to when he turned 20. He was on MBNA, which is a big bank in Delaware. He was on Amtrak. How much was he getting for that? Did he go to meetings? I mean, this is corruption at its most basic essence. But nothing is being said about that. He may be the nominee, which of course is so hypocritical, it's unbelievable. Anyway, so like most Americans, I'm concerned about President Trump getting through this. I believe that he will. I think it will backfire on the Dems and on those who supported this ridiculous agenda. And I think it should, and I think we should hope it does, for the good of our Constitution and for the good of our way of governing ourselves, because we don't want to have presidents just impeached because people don't like him or because, they cooked up some political agenda. Impeachment is a very serious matter. I mean, the only reason why Bill Clinton ultimately was impeached was because he personally and openly committed a crime while he was in the Oval Office, and that is that he lied to a federal judge while under oath. And that was his own stupidity that led to that. I mean, if he hadn't done that, then he should not have been impeached either. It's a very serious matter. So I hope we do take it seriously. Again, we're all watching this carefully. God willing, it's going to backfire in the face of these corrupt politicians who are insisting on using our system of law to their political advantage. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody.